Good afternoon or evening, whatever it is. I'm Dr. Stephen Jinsky from the Frost School of Music at the University of Miami, and my co-presenter today, Dr. Bamari Cohen-Leon from Bridgewater College in Virginia. Our presentation is entitled Combining Universal Design for Learning Principles and Culturally Responsive Practices with Special Learners in the Music Classrooms. Next slide. Culturally responsive teaching and universal design for learning work together to create equitable learning spaces. Both approaches use students' own backgrounds and expectations and encompass instruction that is engaging for all students in the class.
So I'll start first talking about culturally responsive pedagogy, a way in which we can respond to cultural diversity. So first of all, we are acknowledging that we are working towards improving learning towards students that have been traditionally marginalized in educational settings. The interesting thing about culturally responsive pedagogy is that it focuses on the strengths and assets of our students, on what they bring. And we acknowledge that everyone has something to contribute to the learning environment. It seeks to optimize student choice and a voice. So we're saying that everyone has a voice that deserves to be heard, and it makes learning relevant for all students. So that relevancy is a critical point in this. We acknowledge that students learn better when the content is familiar. It's content that is interesting for them. And not only that, it's also content that is challenging. And it's presented in ways that is grounded on prior knowledge. Unfortunately, many special learners in occasions are given busy work.
Right. So the thing that we need to remember here with particularly those students with intellectual or physical disabilities, they many times do inappropriate or uninteresting things. They're given a percussion instrument or they're doing listening rather than meaningful activities. So what we're trying to do is take away the stigma and so that they encounter interactions with their classmates as typical peers. And things that they see in the real world rather than artificial. So universal design for learning principles and learning diversity is the other part of this combination that we're looking at. Just like CRT tries to include the strengths of all students, the instruction in designing for a universal learning approach, it provides a usable instruction for everyone. It addresses sensory challenges, physical challenges, communication, cognitive, behavioral challenges. And when we address all the challenges as part of our planning, instructional planning, we make the teaching accessible to all students rather than just the typical student or which again, we think that these approaches go together really well.
Yes. So now I'm going to address barriers to both of these approaches because, as we said, there are many intersections. So first of all, expectations matter. So that could be a barrier. What type of expectation you have, especially towards marginalized populations or special learners. When we set appropriate learning goals for students and expect growth, growth should always be our ultimate goal. No matter how small that growth is, that is what we have in our minds. When we do that, we start treating students in a different manner than if we expect them to fail. So we see, unfortunately, the negative attitudes toward how we perceive cultures that are outside of what is familiar for us, and also how we approach learning diversity. So we want to be always aware of our own biases and how we perceive others that are not necessarily close to our life experiences.
Right.
And we want to make sure that we always point out how each student has something to contribute to the music classroom. So there are many ways in which we can help and teach students. We are the model. So we are modeling in the music classroom things that we want to see in the outside world.
So when we're dealing with both culture and learning challenges, diversity is and differences are valued rather than poo-pooed. We want to focus on the disability as a valuable part of their diversity. One of the things when we looked at both approaches, we realized that the prior learning model in special education, which is very much from the DSM deficit medical model, has really morphed into more of a differences model. So it's different, not less. And in the same mode, culturally static pedagogy. In other words, Western art music as the model, and every other music is being compared to Western art music as the model, as opposed to being culturally responsive in your pedagogy, where you're using you're addressing musics individually with respect. So the differences that we encounter, both learning differences and cultural differences, are not deficits. So we're morphing from a deficit model to a differences model. And we see diversity as now a strength rather than something we have to fix. We can reach more people with these multiple approaches if we use all the learning modes that are available and all the cultures that are in our classes. For example, if we're trying to reach students with various disabilities, if we use teaching techniques that are tailored for each one of the disabilities as a matter of overall planning, no one's singled out. And therefore, different people will have different ways that will actually become stronger teachers overall.
And that's exactly what makes universal design for learning universal. We are tackling all the differences that we have in our classroom and making sure that what we do, it's relevant and it's meaningful for everyone. So we do that by making sure that when we present material, we do it in a multitude of ways. So we select different methods of instruction, different modalities, and we also include cross-curricular learning. We also figure out ways in which students can show what they know, multiple ways. And we are okay with sometimes letting students choose what is the best way for them to showcase what they learn. So it can be physical, expressive, verbal, oral. And then we also try to find different ways in which we can keep students engaged and motivated.
Right, and just a couple of examples, and again, there are many more examples than the ones we're providing, but the ideas include things like representing sound in different ways, not just notation, using solfege and choral, both with motion and with using written and sung patterns. So we use them in multiple modes, and we use colors. So to associate tone qualities, for example, as well as these actions. Remember, we want, as Vamari just mentioned, we want students to be able to demonstrate what they know in the way that they can demonstrate it the best. So we give them a choice of response as well as a choice of complexity. And they move as far along as they can. We can also have them brainstorm and work together on solutions and create rubrics that are tailor-made, and even the use of icons or pictures, depending on their verbal level. So even if they're nonverbal, they can participate.
Good. And we mentioned how important choice is in this case. So if we want to keep students engaged and motivated, well, sometimes they will have the choice to either do playing of an instrument, or in other cases, singing. We are going to have students that are going to prefer to work in small groups or independently or with a larger group. We want to make sure that if we are working with piece of music like the aquarium, that we have many different ways of making students interested. So it's not only the sound, but we also have a picture book, we have images. And it's always very important to bridge that gap between the music that students enjoy in their daily lives and the music that we provide in the music classroom. That is going to be very important. And that's actually something that relates. This is where we see a very clear intersection with culturally responsive teaching practices. So in first place, in this model here, we have awareness. I mentioned how important it is for us to be aware of our positionality within the culture that we teach. So us knowing our own cultural lens and understanding all the different things that are part of culture, understanding how that can impact the way you learn and your preferences. Another important component of culturally responsive teaching practices is learning partnerships. We want to reimagine how we relate with students. We want this relationship to be a mentorship. We want to showcase that and to show to students that we are willing to learn from them, that we don't know it all. We also want to make sure that we are constantly showing students that we care about them, but we don't want that to be a limitation. We also want to find a good balance so that we push them while we show that we care. And we want to make sure that we in this community support each other. In the area of information processing, we want to continue finding ways of stimulating our students' brains and intellective capacity, so that is related to expectations and what we think our students can accomplish, and the limitations that sometimes we put on them. And we want to be authentic. If this type of music is learned traditionally by oral mode, then we want to respect that. And we want to provide different ways of learning music. So authentic learning is going to be essential. And then the community of learners and the learning environment, especially in music, we want to always show that music should not be a competition. Unfortunately, that's something that we see a lot in certain contexts, like in ensembles, and that's not what we want if we want to be culturally responsive. We want to make sure that each student understands that they have a voice and they have agency, and that we all can make changes to the culture of the school and outside. So some examples. We, as we mentioned already, we are not going to know everything, especially when we're talking about culture. If we have many cultures that are represented, we have to do our homework, but we also have to find ways of letting students show us who they are. That will help them also feel proud of their identity. So we should also always respect student choices and musical preferences, never say comments that could impose a specific view. I've already mentioned the importance of authentic learning. Always trying to figure out how this type of music is passed or is learned outside of the music classroom. As I mentioned, activities for students to share part of their lives, and that creates a sentiment of pride. And just developing a community where everyone contributes and helps. And we're also acknowledging how important it is for both cases when we're talking about students with disabilities and addressing cultural diversity, how important family engagement and parental participation is. We always have to give parents the message that they're important partners, that we're also willing to learn from them, that they can be important contributors. We want to acknowledge the strengths and gifts that they could bring. So it relates to culture in the sense that we want to show them that we know that even if they don't speak the same language, or if they have limited fluency in a language, they still have many ways in which they can contribute to the community. And if we have in the music class opportunities for family to teach songs that are important for their culture, or opportunities for them to serve as mentors, that will be a great opportunity for our students.
Right, and I'll just mention as part of that process, both of our research deals with parents, parental involvement, and part of this that I think is really powerful is the idea of respect. Mm-hmm. Being able to respect our students' backgrounds and the culture of the family, their culture, there's the school culture, there's the art music and the folk music, all of the different aspects of culture and the way people learn. If we can learn from each other and do such things as simple as ask them things.
Yeah, so being proactive is very important, because
it's like we don't know everything. So all right, so I'm going to talk about the how we're going to kind of combine these two in the process. So very similar to any kind of process of learning diversity and the cultural and the UDL format, we start with goals. We always have goals. The second step is identifying all the barriers. Now, if we're thinking about UDL only, we're thinking of learning challenges. But if we incorporate culture as well, it enhances UDL by the use of culture as well. So, and then we talk about how do we reach them? Well, with the goals and the barriers identified, we talk about how to reach them, the multiple means of presenting information, for example, and multiple ways for students to demonstrate what they know, as well as using the knowledge of their backgrounds to make the engagement in classroom situations better. So, for example, if we're looking at the representation part of UDL, where we're doing multiple ways of representing information, we can use visual or auditory or multimedia. We use multiple perspectives. We may have other cultures' versions of a concept, and as Vamari mentioned, different ways of even well, this is the next slide, but different ways of learning content, whether it's orally or through notation. So if we're talking about the action and expression aspect of UDL, we're going to be talking about experiential learning, call and response, storytelling. We're going to look at ways that we can engage students so that they don't have a negative mindset. Oh, I don't know this. No, you know it in a different way. So we will find the ways that you actually know it, and will allow you to show what you know through the means that you that work best for you.
Absolutely. And then we also here for the engagement, giving students opportunity to use examples and to use analogies that connect to their lives directly. And as Stephen, Dr. Z, how we call him, mentioned, that growth mindset is very important for that motivation that we need in all our learners. Knowing that we need to have a positive mindset, because even if it takes a long time, we're gonna get to where we need to get if we work together. So in conclusion, we definitely think that both of approaches can be used together, and that they give us a more encompassing way of addressing diversity. So they have differences, but they have many commonalities that can strengthen the way we teach our students. When we limit education to what we consider normal or average, or that model that for many years we wanted to our students to fit in, then we make it a very narrow kind of art. And that's not what music is. Music is this wonderful tool that we have in our hands to teach students the beauty that lies in the uniqueness that you bring to the music classroom.
Right, and I'll just add, we're looking at diversity as a strength, and we're also saying with the combination of CRT and UDL, we're advocating an approach that is not a normative approach, but you looking at diversity as and differences as ways to enhance instruction. So I want to thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you.